That's a cute palm tree. I love it. Backlit too. I tried to make it nice. Wanted to have a nice background, but that's not gonna work. Bring it over here where it's a little bit easier to see. This is a new palm that I just got in the mail very recently. This is an Hydroponics Myolensis. Amazing palm trees. I haven't grown this one before, but it inspired me to sit out and talk about some king palms. King palms are great, and they don't get the love and attention they deserve very often here on the YouTube in the US. And I think that's because they're widely, mostly grown in California. That's where they're the most common. You don't see them as often in, the palm tree state down in Florida I don't know why. I know why they're sold a lot in California, but why I don't see them more commonly being produced by growers down in Florida, that's an odd one to me. Let's talk about why. Oh, and hi. Hey, what's up, everyone? Jeff here. How's everybody doing? Hope you're doing well. I'm great. King palms as a whole, great group of palm trees. There are a few that you would find most commonly here in the US. They're all native to Australia, but the Purpurea has a beautiful purple-ish crown shaft on it. The Maxima Cunninghamiana, I always have trouble saying that, and the Alexandrae, and then the Myolensis, which is what this one is right here. The ones you're going to see the most often, probably the Alexandrae, Cunninghamiana, and then the Maxima. Their common characteristics is they have a tall, slender, smooth trunk with the rings on it. They have a nice green crown shaft, and then the rest of it is going to be variations in cold hardiness, color within the crown shaft, and the foliage, and how they hold their foliage. A lot of it comes down to aesthetics. If you're looking for cold hardiness, the Cunninghamiana, I just can't say that word, they tend to be the most cold hardy. All of them in comparison to the very common Adenidia palms, these over here, and even the Alexander palms, which you can't really, I have one back there. In comparison to those palm trees, pretty dang cold hardy. You can go into the upper 20s, tolerate some frost before completely defoliating. Cunninghamiana can generally go into the mid 20s. Some people say even lower than that before completely dying, but expect them to defoliate if you have multiple frosts, especially if you're someplace where that never happens and the plant's not used to it. They're not going to look great, but they'll push through it. Whereas you have palms like Adenidias, not so much. Adenidias love the heat and the humidity. King palms do too, right? They love it warm and humid, but they get by wonderfully in California where they have the heat, but not so much the humidity and the rainfall that a lot of these other smooth trunked palms really prefer. And they are fast growers too. I'm trying to see, is there any color on this crown shaft? Not yet. Talk about that more in a little bit. But yeah, they're fast growers. Faster than Adenidias, faster than Alexanders. Those are my two comparisons for the king palm, because those are the ones that are most commonly sold, at least across most of the US, if you're getting them as a houseplant or if you're down south trying to grow them in the ground. Usually you're seeing Adenidias and Alexander palms for quick growing, smooth trunked palms that are relatively inexpensive. West Coast, not the case. Alexander palms, or not Alexander, the Hydroponics Alexandria, and the Cunninghamiana Maxima Purpurensis, or is it Purpurea? I don't remember. It's a purple crown shaft. And now the Myolensis is starting to become more common. You know what? Let's try this over here. How's this lighting? That's better. Decent enough backdrop. This one right here, the Myolensis, is more ornamental in my opinion. There's a lot to say about it. It's important stuff to say too. They're endangered. So you want to make sure you're obviously getting them from somebody who's growing them from seed, right? Don't want these poached. That would be very, very, very bad. Native to Northeast Australia, they tend to grow along riversides or in foresty areas around the rivers. What sets these apart is they tend to have more of a blue-green crown shaft, just like a hint of blue, which this one isn't big enough. You can't see it yet, but that's a defining characteristic. And they have an arch to their pinnae on the front. So I'll have a picture up here on the screen. You can see it almost looks like someone took a coconut palm and stuck it on top of a small royal palm, and now you have a Myolensis. Very beautiful, graceful king palm in comparison to the others, which are all beautiful. I love all the king palms. I don't think there's anything wrong with any of them. But in my opinion, I think the Myolensis is probably the most ornamental, has the most ornamental value. They also have a generally, not always, but they generally have a nice swelling around the base of the trunk, which is beautiful. Also sets them apart from some of the others. They all can have some swelling. Some of that just goes back to their growing conditions, but that's fairly typical with them. They still have all the other typical king palm characteristics though. fairly slender trunk, fast growing. They'll go up to, I think, like 65 feet tall. But that's obviously, that's their native environment, right? That's not as common in cultivation, but that's starting to change. I'm starting to see them more and more and more. Take a close look at them, review the sellers, see what else they've been selling to make sure that maybe you're actually getting a Myolensis, because when they're smaller, it can be pretty hard to distinguish between a Myolensis and any of the other ones. They haven't come into all of their adult characteristics yet. They need to get a few feet taller. But the nice thing about a king palm, they'll go from this size to about, I'd say 5-6 feet in just a couple of years. They grow very quickly. They like full sun, more so when they're mature. They can take morning sun and then afternoon shade when they're smaller, especially if you live in a very dry, arid climate. Then afternoon shade's a good idea for them. They like a lot of water, so the soil needs to drain freely. If it's organically rich, that's just going to be better for them, going to have less issues with nutrient deficiencies. I would fertilize them just like I do all my other palm trees with a palm tree fertilizer about 3 times a year. That's the slow release. You could use the liquid as often as you want to, as long as you're following the directions and it's an active growth. I mean, you can see movement in the plant and it's actually, doing something. Not supposed to be as cold hardy as the Cunninghamiana, but still pretty cold hardy because it's a king palm. I'm saying all this in comparison to most other smooth trunked and nice green crown shafted palms that we have for sale here in the United States. And the Myolensis specifically is supposed to have a slightly longer crown shaft and maybe shorter petioles. I don't know if I'm on board with the shorter petiole thing, just based on pictures that I see of these when they're mature, but that's what some people say. So there's the description, all the fun stuff about the Myolensis specifically. Like I said, king palms as a whole are just awesome palms. I've specifically only grown the Alexandre and the Cunninghamiana. Had them for many years. They did wonderfully. Eventually they got too big. This was before there was a company that I could rely on to move my big palm trees into a warehouse for me in the winter time. But they're great. They grow really fast up until they're like 10, 12 feet tall, and then they kind of just go back to being more of a moderate to fast grower as far as the palms are concerned. The thing I love about them so much, pretty much everything I've been talking about, is that they can take some more cold. They're not going to be as fussy about humidity, meaning the brown tips, right? They're all over Southern California. It's not humid there. And depending on the area, not that warm either. You're looking at, the coast south of LA, going more into like Orange County, San Diego. It doesn't usually get all that warm, right? And they're still doing pretty well. So they're not going to be like those Adenidia palms or the Tychospermas where they want that warmth to keep them moving. They do better inside because of all of those things. They can handle the drier environments and they can grow just fine without needing things to be in the mid to upper 80s at all times for them. They like a lot of water, but that's fine. A lot of people like to water their plants. They don't think they want any more water than an Areca palm does, or even an Adenidia. They just aren't going to rot and die on you when you water them properly during the winter months when you have them inside the house. Or if you're trying to grow them year-round inside the house, it's just a palm tree you're going to have around for a lot longer than some of the others that are nice, but just full of problems as far as growing them indoors goes, right? I mean, outdoors too. I'd say they're more sturdy and they're faster growing. So why they're not more popular down south in Florida, they're not being produced by the growers, I don't really know. Maybe West Coast has a monopoly on the seeds. I don't understand it. I know that they're becoming more popular in southern Florida and some areas more up to people who are trying to grow some neat looking palms in central Florida as well, but it's still nothing like you see with the Adenidias and foxtail palms, just a lot of the other smooth trunked palms. I don't know. Do they take longer to grow from seed? I don't think so. I've started these from seed before and I feel like it was relatively quick and easy. So, I don't know. But hey, a lot of y'all are in Florida. Some of y'all are in California. That's why I wanted to make this video, so we could talk about these palms. And I don't make a lot of videos about palm trees that do really great in California, Southern California specifically. When I talk about the Adenidias and some of these others, they don't really do all that great for you guys who are, maybe you're in Orange County or, San Clemente, whatever, Southern California. It's not a good option. Don't bother with the Adenidias. Do the king palms? They're great. And then say you go ahead and you buy one of these, I've sold you on them. Care for them, pretty simple. The smaller the palm, the less light that it's going to need. Keep them away from, harsh drafts and air conditioning blowing right on them. Let the soil be consistently moist in the winter months. If you're having really short day lengths, that depends on where you live. But if you live someplace where the day lengths are pretty short and your home's not necessarily warm, meaning over 74, 75, somewhere in there, then I'd let them dry out about 50% of the way, somewhere in there. And if it's looking like they're starting to crisp up, then just keep them consistently moist. Top 1 to 3 inches of the soil can dry out. Fertilize them consistently because they will grow their best. All the plants will. This is all basic houseplant stuff, just horticulture in general. Having nutrient, minerals, going to help the plants grow more quickly. A fertilizer made for palm trees would be ideal. The perfect palm is one that I'm using right now. I have found with smaller palm trees to be very, very careful with how much you give them because it can scorch them up. It seems to burn their roots, but the Palm Gain, great option. There are lots of palm fertilizers to go ahead and use, but I would say during their active growth, they're tropical, they should be in active growth at all times, right? But we're talking about keeping them as a house plant. So the longer days, right? Active growth, longer photo periods, they're going to be growing more, then it would be good to go ahead and do a slow release every probably 3 months, whatever the directions say, and incorporate a liquid fertilizer made for palm trees at least once a month or whatever the frequency says for the type that you're using. Watch out for scale, spider mites, mealybugs, all those things. Palm trees are just a magnet for some of those pests. Generally shouldn't be too much of an issue. They tend to be vigorous and fast growing, so as long as they're nice and healthy, then hopefully the pests won't even be a problem. Dang, I lost that lighting quick. Was that like 5 minutes when the sun's already all the way over there? They are self-cleaning, so do not start tugging on these old leaf bases until they're fully dried out and that palm has grown some and it's nice and loose. If you have to pull much on it, then it's not time to remove the brown. Let them go ahead and brown up and yellow out. Start with yellow and then they turn brown. You get, the whole thing. Do you know what I'm talking about? Let them take the energy out of their old leaves before removing them, right? Once they're fully browned out, you can cut them and then wait for the old crown shaft, the piece that's down in there, to fully brown out, and you can pluck it right off and it'll keep them looking nice. But that's about it. You don't need to do much with them. Everything else is general houseplant care. What else? Oh, don't let them sit in water. That wouldn't be great for them, right? That's just general rule of thumb with the majority of palms that you grow inside. And again, general houseplant information. Otherwise, I would say as far as having a trunked palm that you can grow indoors and they will grow quickly, they're not going to throw a fit about humidity. This is great. King palms are fantastic. I'd like for them to become more common. I think that would be something all of us palm tree lovers and enthusiasts around the country here in the US would really love, for them to not be so restricted to basically just being in California and then being somewhat more of a collector type palm down south in Florida. They're not really a collector type. That's probably being a little bit too harsh on them because they are sold down in Florida. It's just the growers don't seem to include them on availability lists all that often to be shipped up north. Maybe they don't ship well. I don't know. I mean, I've had plenty of them shipped here when they're small and they ship just fine, but maybe when they're bigger, maybe they're kind of like a sable palm where their inner core, the heart, is soft. So I'm just thinking out loud now. We're just rambling at this point. You get it. King palms are great. Let me know if you're growing them, some of your favorite types, tips, tricks, suggestions for everybody. Always appreciate it. And comment down below and just say hi. I love talking to everybody. All right, as always, and most importantly, everybody, keep on growing.